Has this ever happened to you? Poor little old MCU approaching you to show their newest drawing, one that you've been anticipating for quite some time, but when you finally get to see it, you're just disappointed. And there might be some effort behind it, but this kid is an artist, and you know this new drawing just wasn't made to its fullest potential. It's not going on the fridge with the best of the best like you so desperately wanted it to. It's going in the trash. And in the MCU's 17 years of cinematic history, their filmmaking enterprise has made a lot of mistakes, leading to some massive, but entirely subjective, missed opportunities. And with the sheer volume of projects we've gotten lately, seen as subpar to what we'd gotten before, that has never been more true. I mean, the MCU makes the odd movie every now and then that is a must-watch, genuinely incredible experience, something that has always and likely will always be true. But I want to get right into this list because all, if not most of these, can be seen universally as wasted potential. Welcome back to Sandwich Reviews. I'm that sandwich guy, your nihilistic optimist, and today I want to begin a journey into the worst missed opportunities in the MCU. Not to highlight their flaws so we can all point and laugh, but to identify what exactly could have been done differently, all so that in the future it won't happen again. And none of this is counting individual movies whose stories could have been better, basing their narrative on a particular comic arc and ruining it before anything good could be made. An exponentially growing issue I have a whole series of videos on, and many more in the wings. But with that said, let's just jump right in with the most obvious one on the list. Number 6, Secret Invasion. And get ready, because I'm about to spend a long time on this first one, but if I'm honest, to do something like Secret Invasion, you kinda need to make it its own phase, giving each complex story point time to breathe so that it'll organically flow, but also just so that the audience can get involved in the conspiracies. However, a Secret Invasion television show on Disney Plus still could have worked. In the past, I've pitched a Secret Invasion crossover event for the TV shows to build up to, and that is what Secret Invasion needed. Not just a well-written mystery show where you can't trust anyone, but something that was planned out and set up years, if not decades ago, which is impossible to plan ahead for, but could have been life-changing. But instead, what we got was by far Marvel's worst. Seriously, I doubt anyone, no matter how much of a hater or a shill or whatever they're calling it these days, nobody's coming to bat for this show. Though I guess that's an accomplishment in and of itself, because uniting everyone across the board to unanimously say we hate this has to count for something, so I'll give them some credit. They did manage something impossible like that, but all that praise goes out the window because if they were going to accomplish something impossible, it should have been the Secret Invasion story we all wanted. Something that featured Skrull sleeper agents across the MCU, some of which didn't even know that they were a Skrull, having lived fulfilling lives with loved ones and families. But of course, the comic story we all know begins with the initial reveal that while on a trip to Japan, the Avengers find out Elektra is a Skrull, and the story only blows out from there, with anyone who could be a Skrull questioned and closely monitored, dismantling any sense of trust overnight. Of course, that trust was already on uneasy ground before this event kicked off, with an additional Secret Avengers team separate from the OG Mighty Avengers operating on the side. Then, to make matters worse, there were the Thunderbolts, who are very different from their MCU counterparts, in that they are led by Norman Osborn and consist of disguised villains. But with those three groups, and including the many others within the wide world that is Marvel's planet Earth, they're met with a massive coordinated full frontal assault, directed to eliminate all of the biggest threats to the Skrulls' impending invasion, teleporting half of the Baxter building to the negative zone, knocking the Keep, Sword space station out of the sky, and worst of all, thanks to Jarvis being a secret Skrull and injecting Stark Tech with an alien virus, everything using that technology malfunctions to the point of just just not working, meaning all of the prisons, Tony's own armor and life support, and even S.H.I.E.L.D.'s helicarrier are rendered inoperable. And then, on top of all of that, a spaceship filled with old comic-accurate Avengers crash into the Savage Land, sowing even more ambiguity and mistrust as to who is an Avenger and who is a Skrull. Something I won't spoil here, because not knowing is part of why that story works, yet there is one small element I feel like I need to bring up. That being Secret Invasion's sleeper agents versus plain old spies. Because most of these Skrulls invading know exactly who they are, and were given powers meaning they can't shapeshift, but a small handful had been a Skrull spy without ever realizing it, until the moment the invasion arrives and their true memories were given back to them. And honestly, I prefer for spies or moles to know and be aware of their actions, mainly just to add to that dramatic reveal and rug pull rather than muddle it in ambiguity. But the comic Secret Invasion is all about sleeper agents, so I feel an adaptation would have to be. But there's also a couple more events of note, such as Hulkling trying to talk down the incoming armada, and I mean he had to give it a shot, or when the Skrulls attempt to make Tony, a certifiable human, think he's a Skrull, then immediately going live at Times Square disguised as Tony to sow even more dissent. And I'll be the first to admit, to include all of those moments, a comic-accurate adaptation would have been as high budget as it would have been unfeasible. Not just difficult to get filmed, but unworkable. Yet that's the firecracker Marvel lit by announcing a Secret Invasion show. Yet they refuse to actually give us a Secret Invasion. To begin with, a story like that, even in name only, needs a bunch of big name heavy hitters in the cast, all to sow dissent and mystery for the narrative to play with. Because without suspects to suspect, there's no point to the mystery, with the one and only villainous reveal that the MCU Secret Invasion gave us being Rhodey, who was reintroduced into this with so much tonal whiplash that anyone with half a brain cell could see it coming. Hell, the internet had suspected him for years just from the process of elimination, with Rhodey being the only character who could have been revealed as a Skrull without getting in the way of other storylines, despite the fact that this still managed to screw over his character, though maybe a lot of his ongoing development was meant to be covered in Armor Wars, which is not coming out anymore. Frankly, I have no idea. Which brings me to the next topic on this list. Number 5, simply taking too long to get some of these projects out. Because where is Armor Wars? Is it still in production? Shelved for now? Permanently scrapped? Yet the real issue here is that Armor Wars is just the tip of the iceberg. And I'll be the first to call out how creative and original the MCU's latest output has been, and the argument is right there that the MCU had to go through some rough patches to get to where they're at.
Everybody wants happiness, nobody wants pain, but you can't have a rainbow without a little rain.
And all that. However, in a best case scenario, all of Marvel's 2025 movies should have come out years before. Thunderbolts, Brave New World, and Fantastic Four needed to come out as late as 2022, releasing alongside Shang-Chi and the Eternals to set up their important characters and storylines, establishing them to be seminal figures in this ongoing saga, rather than being the perceived last-minute course corrections that most see them as. For Brave New World specifically, Marvel clearly wanted a Falcon and Winter Soldier show beforehand, seeing the internet's love of this one pick and seemingly greenlighting it with that solely in mind. But there's no reason why Sam's movie couldn't have been directly after. I get it takes time to make movies, but you're supposed to plan ahead, Marvel. That's why you get paid the big bucks. Because Sam Wilson earned his spot as a central figure in this saga, and as I've highlighted in a video essay before, could have been an interesting character, but was let down. But anyway, as it stands, the entirety of the Multiverse Saga has been spent introducing, with some sort of scattershot approach as if they were firing some unupgraded video game shotgun, only sending out a half-assed spray of measly pellets that, at best, might tickle. And as a staunch Marvel shill and defender, I have no doubt that a correctly handled shotgun approach was exactly what they were going for, but they needed that pathway to have breadth and depth. And even more than that, for a clear and concise roadmap to be decided early on and adhered to. The point of storytelling, especially for something long form like the MCU, is to introduce something, setting it up in the audience's mind, then to steadily remind them of this plot point or person, the key component of which that the audience doesn't immediately recognize that's what's happening, with that reminder seamlessly integrating with the rest of the story, and then, after the audience has had time to process everything, the payoff comes. So by all means, make the audience wait. Building anticipation for something we know is coming is why the MCU succeeded in the first place. But the MCU hasn't given us any assurances that the recent introductions will come back. And I'm crossing my fingers some small part of Avengers Doomsday will have a well-written element of it being the Avengers versus the new Avengers. But for that incredible concept to have been executed properly, the Thunderbolts needed to come out at the beginning of this saga, as it featured characters like the Red Guardian and US Agent, who were introduced with untold potential, but were left unseen and up in the air for years after they were established. Again, I know it takes a long time to make a movie, and even longer to make a good one, but if the Thunderbolts came out directly after Black Widow, its profits would have skyrocketed, utilizing and establishing B-list characters to create a new morally ambiguous group within the universe, giving its audience something new and fun while still going back to Marvel's roots of unlikable characters becoming likable by doing the right thing. But if they were launched in Phase 4 no later than 2022, then these characters and plotlines could have organically become something, instead of adding on to the confused state of the current MCU. Also, fun side note, the Fantastic Four didn't come out during Phase 4, and that might be the biggest missed opportunity here. But if you haven't noticed, I won't spend as much time as I did on this as I did on the first one, just because the MCU taking too long to get some of these projects out goes hand in hand with the next one on the list, that being number 4. A desperate need for a smaller scale Avengers movie in between Endgame and Doomsday. And to me, it's more than an obvious flaw that we haven't seen the Avengers in any way, shape, or form since Endgame. It's aggravating, because more than a year ago, before the Thunderbolts was ever revealed to be the MCU's new Avengers, I pitched a new Avengers vs. Thunderbolts movie, and that right there is exactly what we're missing. Because the way that Doomsday is shaking out, they're seemingly throwing away their new interesting characters to the wayside simply to get as many butts in seats with their OG Avengers, making it feel desperate and cheap. But as I said in my recent Doomsday video, it's the Multiverse Saga's big event Avengers movie. Obviously, those OG characters were probably gonna have cameos anyway, but I'm just very concerned on how there's clearly less importance on Sam Wilson, Shang-Chi, Monica Rambeau, Carol Danvers, or the many others established post-Endgame, which highlights another major flaw in that they may be introduced too much. But that is a massive topic for another day, because at the heart of this is one simple problem: a fundamental misunderstanding from Marvel of what they want their Avengers movies to be. Because they're expensive, they kinda have to be, featuring countless big name actors and tons of special effects, but they do not have to be monetary investments that make $1 billion in return, which is an aspect that has eclipsed every conversation surrounding any Avengers movie. Just because it's an event movie doesn't mean it has to be bigger than Endgame, because each subsequent Avengers adventure has seemingly been more explosive than the last. Whereas all us audiences want is a well-told story about a group of people putting aside their differences to work together, and scaling the Avengers level threat down to focus on said team, depicting the dynamics between these characters introduced post-Endgame could have done so much, particularly when it comes to jogging the audience's mind and reminding them that these people exist. because I can't help but feel that some of these guys are gonna pop up in Doomsday, and there's gonna be a lot of people in the audience who have no idea who they are. Because going back to simply wanting a smaller scale Avengers movie, and Marvel's fundamental misunderstanding of them, the straightforward truth of what an Avengers movie is not that it is an investment or expenditure, though that may be true where the studio is concerned. To us, the audience, you know, the people that these movies are made for, an Avengers movie is merely a bookend, placed at the end of a phase to illustrate where we are on the overall MCU roadmap, but also to highlight all of the characters established, showing where they are and what they're up to. Which is why, though it's far from Marvel's best, I will never go as far as to say that Age of Ultron is bad. It's got some missed opportunities that could have earned its own spot on the list, but it's also just fun. Featuring this dinner party scene that, to this day, is still one of the best scenes to flesh out the Avengers team and their interactions. And I just want that, but for the new Avengers. Well, not the new Avengers, though I would like to see more of their ongoing dynamics. I mean Sam's team. God, this stuff is so confusing and could have made for one hell of a fun meta-narrative diving into the public's idea of who the Avengers are, alongside just depicting these characters together, but I fear that's a proposition that, in Marvel's infinite profit-driven wisdom, they'll never even consider. Of course, I'm holding out hope that in a year's time I'll be eating my words, but right now, it looks like the new wave of characters introduced post-Endgame are gonna be forgotten about, and nothing could make me more sad. Needless to say, that does involve some stinkers, but not getting the exact reception they wanted after introducing someone, and thus seemingly deciding to pull the plug entirely, just makes the studio seem fickle and almost unreliable. Why would I invest my time and interest into a character when there's no guarantee they'll be seen again? Of course, recently we got Wonder Man, and I don't really expect him to come back, and that had no bearing on the quality of the show whatsoever, but that is in a rare case of a genuinely well-written thing that stands just fine on its own. For the others, a follow-up is more than required, it's essential, and that's the next missed opportunity on the list. Number 3, not following up on some of these characters and stories. Because when you think about it, the only thing they did correctly was setting up Miss Marvel, introduced and established extremely well, teased to appear again with a fun post-credit scene, then was brought together with multiple characters introduced all over the place in a concise story that still reintroduced all of those people within the context of what was going on, so that the many casual viewers in the audience weren't lost. I know the Marvels didn't fare that well and did plenty wrong, but it deserves more credit for all the things it did right. It's not going to blow your mind with any of its twists and turns, or lack thereof, but it is a guaranteed fun time. But clearly, there's so many people I could bring up with this topic. Moon Knight, Ironheart, Namor, the Hawkeyes, Shang-Chi, all the way to the entirety of the Young Avengers team, that I guess is gonna be another element of Doomsday to be crammed in with the rest, all of which desperately needed some sort of sequel to hammer home their themes and how awesome they are. Again, reminding those casual viewers that they exist, but also re-establishing them and their dynamics for the Marvel fans that care. But there is no other team that exemplifies this idea more than the Eternals, because Arisham's Final Judgment is taking quite a while. But in all seriousness, am I the only one going to bat for this okay movie? It seems like everyone, including Marvel, has given up on them, but not me. And I'm not going to say that The Eternals was robbed of the glory it rightfully deserved. I've defended this movie more than enough, yet I do know it's got plenty of flaws, predicating the entire emotional side of the narrative on a relationship the narrative itself tells you not to root for. Plus, it gave us an expansive, somewhat experimental story with an extremely wide cast, resulting in a regrettable but very predictably floundering reception and box office. But it just really sucks how the Eternals were handled after the movie came out, letting down that entire extended cast and the big plans they had for each and every one of them by deciding that the follow-up to what was obviously only a part 1 to an ongoing narrative wasn't going to happen. And I'm still holding out hope that it could still occur post-Secret Wars, but that hope dwindles more every day, which sucks, because not even including said sequel story, there are countless next-level narratives involving the Eternals that could be drawn from for an adaptation, not just making these guys household names, but giving Marvel the opportunity to redirect anything that didn't work for the original. People didn't love the uninteresting Gallifreyan suits and power designs, or the monotonous ship. Well, that can all be fixed in a sequel. And just like how the Avengers of the Multiverse Saga needed more time to be established, giving the audience more time with these characters is exactly what they needed. Plus, I just like the Judgment Day comic that would have been the basis for a sequel, where in my head, some next level story is still possible, which could feature the Avengers level threat that is Arishem coming to Earth to complete his final judgment, requiring every single hero to fight him, or could just be an emotional story with the Eternals and only the Eternals, possibly with Harry Styles' Eros revealed to be a self-serving twist villain that the Eternals must face as well as Arishem, paralleling the first Eternals movie in the best ways and building off of its seminal story. However, I know that that's just me, and because of that, I won't spend all day trying to change your mind. Instead, just moving on to the next missed opportunity on the list. Number 2, a depressing lack of special presentations. And this one is more up in the air, because each would have had to be made well individually, all the way from concept to writing to filming, but I personally just want so many more of these. In fact, I would go as far as to say I need more of these, because Marvel special presentations have been, right from the get-go, amazing, going 2 for 2, with a spectacular Halloween special throwing back to the best of Universal's classic monster flicks and other definitive archetypal horror movies, with masterful light and shadow work, as well as cinematography throughout, that made me think, damn, whoever made this must have really known what they were doing. Except this guy, Michael Giacchino, wasn't experienced when it came to direction, this being his directorial debut. Not that he was inexperienced, in fact, he has a storied history in Hollywood as a musical composer, writing the soundtrack for all kinds of movies like Disney Pixar's Ratatouille, Up, Coco, Incredibles 1 and 2, or other blockbusters such as Star Trek and The Batman, the last of which has some extraordinarily punny names in its soundtrack, like Mayoral Ducting, It's Raining Vengeance, and Highway to the Anger Zone. But luckily, practically everything Giacchino touches is gold, so he can name those songs whatever he wants. Yet as far back as 1995, we can see Giacchino working on video game soundtracks like Gargoyles and Jurassic Park Chaos Island, showing just how long he'd been happily trucking along with that career path. But then, for whatever reason, he was approached by Kevin Feige with suggestions for a possible movie. An offer Giacchino eagerly accepted. But to Feige's surprise, he didn't just have this already thought out, he knew exactly what he wanted. That being a Werewolf by Night project. Of course, after the fact, anyone can say this, but Giacchino has gone on record talking about how he'd have stacks of Werewolf by Night, his favorite comic series, on his nightstand, ready to be waded through for the dozenth time. But more so, it was Giacchino's love for old cinematic monster movies that cemented how much he wanted to make Werewolf by Night. Given as a kid, he would sit down with his older brother and watch every monster movie they could get their hands on, pulling a Guillermo del Toro and sympathizing with the freaky and lonely monsters more than the two-dimensional humans. With Giacchino's ultimate goal for his Werewolf by Night project to be a reflection of the empathy always seen, at least between the lines, lines of those classics, diving into humanity's terrible nature of always labeling the other as a monster, and on the less philosophical side, utilizing black and white not to denote a time frame for when the story is taking place, but simply for a fun homage. And Giacchino has previously talked about how Jack Russell or Elsa Bloodstone could just slot right in with the rest of the MCU, but all he cared about was how best to tell this one night in their world, which is how any project needs to be made, but should especially be the motto for these special presentations. Because after that, we got James Gunn giving us one of the most wholesome and fun Christmas specials ever, so there's no reason why Marvel shouldn't have stuck with that and given us more holiday specials. It's clearly worked, so just keep it up. With each celebratory special, Marvel can reach into a different corner of their expansive universe and either introduce something new or flesh out a previously known character's life. Give us a special for Hawkeye on Valentine's Day, one for Moon Knight on Hanukkah, another for the Romanoff family and Thanksgiving. The options are endless. However, even that would limit the infinite possibilities of what we could get from these. So I propose, along with holiday specials, that we just get a bunch of these. Optimistically, if planned and scheduled out right, we could have had one of these once a month, with dozens upon dozens already out. And the best part of all of that would be that none of them are necessary viewing, with their only point being fun. And I've thrown out this idea before, but an ongoing series of special presentations following Howard the Duck's detective agency. Just use the medium. Whether it's wacky and experimental ideas that would have otherwise never gotten to see the light, or making stuff that's already popular. Because we can look forward to Ronaldo Marcus Green's Punisher special releasing sometime this year, possibly connecting the dots between Born Again and Brand New Day, but knowing just how good these special presentations are, let's look to the future and see what else is planned. Oh look, it's nothing. Wild. Anyway, I've spent way too long talking about this, so let's just bring it home with what I think is Marvel's biggest and worst missed opportunity. Number 1, Kang. The most obvious and currently notable member on this list. But this guy has earned the coveted top spot just because, as a concept, Marvel has fumbled their entire Kang story, something I wouldn't even care about had they not kicked it off so well, giving us Marvel fans an inspired reflection of the comic character Immortus and creating He Who Remains. A supremely intelligent figure, not malicious but not benevolent either, more so a force of nature or a byproduct of the chaotic multiverse being kept in order, something we, 4 years ago, assumed would be undone in the opening phase of the Multiverse Saga, but I guess that still needs to happen, or will happen thanks to Doom, or is happening? I honestly don't know. And that's because of how muddled the MCU's handling of Kang has been, further muddling any storyline that involves him, which happened to be the key storylines that the Multiverse Saga was circling. Because I know that all the sacred timeline stuff, including anchor beings, will still have a major impact on Doomsday and Secret Wars, not necessarily changing the events that would happen with them, at least not drastically, but moving those events on the MCU roadmap to the point that entire concepts would be abandoned. And as he was introduced, predominantly when the supposedly worst version of him was being depicted in Quantumania, my one and only question was, what's this guy's end goal? Obviously, he was just trying to free himself from his banishment, and was banished for wiping out entire timelines in the name of order, but what after that? Hell, explaining what that order looked like, whether it was different from He Who Remains version of multiversal order, is sorely missing. At this point, it's just a missed opportunity, earning the top spot on this list, but no more than 3 to 4 years ago, that mystery only made Kang cooler in my mind. Because not knowing that end goal, while still believing that Marvel had some plan for it in mind, genuinely intrigued me, making me desperate for any clue that could point to what that was. Naturally, it's a given that Kang was eliminating timelines for his ideal greater good to construct a perfect utopia, essentially the exact reason why Doom is eliminating timelines, which is why, even with their obvious course correction, scrapping Kang Dynasty doesn't ruin everything that they had planned, because Doomsday will still have some kind of cold open quickly addressing all of the Kang stuff, most likely with Doom destroying the first obstacle in his way to begin his multiversal conquest, because originally, Kang Dynasty was always going to lead directly into Secret Wars. Yet by skipping or fast-tracking Kang Dynasty and jumping right into Doom controlling the multiverse, every storyline setting Kang up feels counterintuitive to the ongoing multiverse narrative. And that's without even bringing up the MacGuffins originally meant to consolidate the various characters being introduced, that being Shang-Chi's rings and Miss Marvel's bangles, both of which had mystery elements tied in to feed into this narrative that Kang had lost them and would be going after them to power his tech. But of course, those complaints also ignore the glaring problem that is Jonathan Majors. That being said, upon seeing that news, Marvel's first choice should have just been recasting the role. And I did hear a rumor where Marvel wasn't allowed to recast because Majors had it in his contract that he was to play every Kang in the multiverse, but I also would have assumed that his allegations would have made those contracts null and void. But I'm no lawyer, I'm just a big ol' nerd. A nerd who thinks Kang from the comics is cool. With his super tech that at some points is just straight up magic, he's able to be a physical match for the stronger Avengers, but take that all away and he's still unknowingly dangerous, simply because of his knowledge of the time stream, and depending on how informed he is, which he likes to be, could make him unstoppable. And it really sucks that after being the best part of a mediocre to just bad movie, he won't ever even get to fight the Avengers. I know he's made a fraction of the threat he's supposed to be by losing to Ant-Man of all people, but understanding that he was the most Kang, being banished to the quantum realm, there was still a chance to make him threatening after that, but he'll seemingly never get the chance. Hence why he's Marvel's biggest missed opportunity. And if you haven't noticed, surprisingly, this is the first villain on the list. But that's just because if I did choose to include them, that's all this list would be. But if you do want to see more villains that had potential but were entirely wasted, join me next week, or however long it takes me to get that video out, for the MCU's top 10 wasted villains. But until then, as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe for weekly video essays and reviews, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.